Welcome, everybody, to another episode of PhinManiacs Live. It's been a long time. I am your host, Louis Sung. With me, as always, is my co-host, Chad Ronenbaum, and a good friend of the show and fellow PhinManiacs.com contributor, Ian Berger. It's nice to be with you two again, gentlemen, and how are you tonight?
I'm cold, Louis. I'm in Iowa right now, and it snowed, so I'm looking outside, and there's snow on the yard. So
here we go again with the snow. Okay.
I guess I'm getting ready for Green Bay, I suppose. I could look at it that way.
Yeah, I suppose so, yeah. And you're the one who wants to see some snow. Right, Ian?
Yeah, and I'm doing awesome. I'm in 81-degree weather right now, and sunny. Actually, it's not sunny. It's dark South Florida, but loving the weather here right now. But hopefully going to get some snow when I go to the Minnesota Vikings game in a couple of weeks.
Well, we'll see. You asked the guy in Iowa. He's like, no, I'm done after a couple of weeks. Snow's overrated. Like, I'll take your 81-degree winters. All right, so there's plenty of stuff to talk about, and if anybody is wondering, well, Louis, this is a PhinManiacs Live. How come we weren't informed that this was going to happen? Well, this is a live that's not really live, and the reason we're doing this way is because A, it's been a long time since we did a show, and B, the frustration level. Even as the team is currently 5-4 as of this recording, the frustration level with this Miami Dolphins team is very, very, very high, and I have been shellacked from all sides trying to stay in the middle, and I'm starting to lean more towards the negative now, just because I'm really getting tired of seeing certain patterns that once again are manifesting themselves in this football franchise, and I just wanted to be able to get all the thoughts out from everybody without having people throwing in certain tidbits here and there. We will definitely do a live show for you guys, like an actually live show for you guys very soon, just to make sure that we don't forget about all of you listeners out there. But for right now, I just want to be able to let it all out. So, and I'm sure that there's plenty to talk about. We're going to go ahead and get started. It's going to be about Adam Gase and his role as the Miami Dolphins head coach. And Ian is going to have we're going to play the role of a court right now. So Ian is going to be the defendant, and Chad and I, we're going to be kind of the prosecutors. I mean, we're not in the we hate Adam Gase and he's the worst coach ever camp, but there are several things that we're just like, stop doing that, please. So I'm going to go ahead and, Mr. Prosecutor Chad Ronenbaum, the floor is yours.
Well, I think the most important thing you hit on the head, Louis, is the team is 5-4. And so as following the team for, 30 years now at least, I don't ever remember being this down on the team when we had a winning record. Usually in the NFL, it's so competitive, having a winning record is, that's a good thing. And usually you're feeling pretty good to have a winning record. So I think right now the frustration that, for me anyway, personally, it is with Adam Gase. And I have to differentiate two Adam Gases, because there's Adam Gase, the head coach, and there's Adam Gase, the offensive coordinator. And I think when you criticize somebody, you can do it specifically. You can look at them and say, I think they've made a lot of bad judgments on what they're doing, and that you can go case by case. Or you can do the kind of the macro approach and step back and say, all right, I'm going to take a look at this over a period of time and see how this person has produced. And one thing that really stuck in my mind in recent weeks was the exchange Adam Gase had with Armando, the Miami Herald reporter. And what Adam Gase was essentially saying to Armando was, hey, look, you don't know what you're talking about. I watched the film, and they were having an exchange, I believe, about Ryan Tannehill. And Armando's response to Adam Gase was, I understand results. And that was when Adam Gase says, well, that's the way you guys think. We're working on progressing forward. And so I thought a lot about what Adam Gase was saying there, and that he's saying we're trying to develop and progress forward on players. And then I thought a lot about what Armando said on the results. And I think, when you're dealing with statistics, if you're using that as your metric to look at results, statistics are more valid the more of a sample size you have, the more data points you have. And so we're coming up now halfway through 2.5 seasons now on Adam Gase. And the thing that I think, to me, makes me feel like he just isn't getting the job done, at least Adam Gase, the offensive coordinator, is every year he's been basically running the offense for the Dolphins, including the year we even made it to the playoffs, we are one of the worst teams in the NFL in the key offensive statistical categories, and those being the number of third downs we convert, the number of first downs we obtain, and the number of points we score. We are very, very low, if not the bottom, or within the bottom 5 teams since Adam Gase has been here as the offensive coordinator. And so when I step back and look at how offensive coordinators are judged around the league, Adam Gase has failed miserably as an offensive coordinator. And I think you can look at that over 3 years, or you can look at the game we just won against the Jets. That was a completely inept offense that Adam Gase had out there. And you saw him, I think, to the point where he didn't even know what to do. He was sitting on the bench, scribbling on his play sheet, and we were just doing 3 and out, 3 and out, 3 and out. And we got to the end of the game. I don't think there was a fan for the Dolphins that thought there was any chance Miami was going to be able to win that game and run the clock out offensively. And of course, we came in and we went 3 and out. So I think it's hard to argue that any other offensive coordinator in the league would probably be getting fired or be very close to getting fired if the offensive production has been what the team's offensive production has been under Adam Gase. It's just has been very poor. So that being said, I'm extremely unhappy with Adam Gase, the offensive coordinator, and I do feel it's time for him to decide, does he want to be an offensive coordinator or does he want to be a head coach? Because he's not, I think, successfully doing either job well, because I don't think he has time to do both jobs. So I have that aspect on Adam Gase, I guess, from the macro level. From the specific level, some of the things I've had issues with are some of the play calls he's had. I'm a big advocate if you've got 3rd and a half yard or 4th and a half yard or even a yard, when you drop back and throw a pass, or when you run that situation out of the shotgun, again, statistically, I don't think you have a much better, more likelihood of completing a 3rd and a half yard or a 3rd and a yard versus a 3rd and 3 in that formation. And you've got Frank Gore, you can run quarterback sneaks, and they just have not done that. And that is a direct impact on why we don't convert 3rd downs, why we don't get an extra 3 downs, because here we are trying to throw out of situations in the game where your chances of converting on a run are much higher, in my opinion. And I don't have a sheet of data where I look at that, but I mean, it's just kind of a common sense. You look at what teams like that are successful, like the Patriots, they execute a quarterback sneak very well on a half-yard situation, and we don't even attempt it. And I believe that's because our team doesn't even know how to prepare, how to do a quarterback sneak, to even have that prepared in the playbook, because that doesn't matter on personnel. It doesn't matter on who's the quarterback, who's the lineman. It's a very straightforward block, and it's a very straightforward thing to do for your quarterback, but you have to practice it and prepare it. And so I think Adam Gase gets so caught up in the strategy of a game, what play he's going to use to counter this play, and what play he can come up with to attack a defense, that I think he's lost sight of what is the actual game situation, and also what is the team capable of executing. I feel like that's been an issue for him since he's been here, and that's attributed to the slow starts this team typically has, is because Adam Gase is so caught up in his system and what plays he wants to attack with, he doesn't quite comprehend what the players are capable of doing and executing. And so you get a lot of these penalties, you get a lot of mistakes made by players, and it starts to get to be this back and forth as we've watched these seasons progress, that Adam Gase tends to say, I need my guys, I need players that can execute my offense. And I think that just doesn't happen that frequently in the NFL, and you're seeing that on display this season, because we're past the Joe Philbin era now. We're into season 3, and Adam Gase has handpicked the majority of the players he has on his team now, and we're still seeing 3 and out. We're seeing them having trouble executing. And so, I mean, you can definitely justify this team has faced injuries. Obviously he hasn't had his quarterback in Ryan Tannehill for the majority of the last 2 years, but I then question, like, who's making the decision on who these players are for the depth of the team, because it was Adam Gase's decision to have Matt Moore as the quarterback, and then when the season started last year, he immediately abandoned that and went and signed Jay Cutler, which to me was saying Adam Gase did not believe he had a number 2 quarterback in Matt Moore throughout the whole process. I mean, when you go through a whole training camp in an off season, and the moment your quarterback gets hurt, your immediate reactions to go sign somebody off the street, there's a failure there somewhere in personnel. And now we went into this season, and I remember telling you, Lewis, on a podcast that the only way I would see Adam Gase's job being in trouble is if he doesn't address the backup quarterback situation again and Ryan Tannehill gets hurt. And that's really where we're at. We're having a team that's being led by Brock Osweiler, who, you can argue he's not a terrible backup, but he clearly is struggling at times. He has accuracy issues you can see on the field. And my question again is, why did we go through another whole offseason and training camp, and now Brock Osweiler is our number 2 quarterback? Does that mean Adam Gase isn't very good at evaluating to get a backup quarterback, or is there a problem with the front office? But I have a hard time not putting the situation we're in on Adam Gase's shoulders a little bit at the quarterback position without getting one in here. And that's been it's been a frustration of mine in that when Adam Gase was hired, he was supposed to be a very strong offensive-minded coach. And so I would expect if you hire a guy to be your head coach that's supposed to be very talented at putting an offense together, I would expect statistically to at least be in the top half of the league in the offensive categories. And also, if your head coach is brought in because he's supposed to be very good at developing quarterbacks, other than Luke Falk signed, after the season was going,
and he's on IR.
And he's on IR, which isn't Adam Gase's fault, but I haven't seen this team even remotely bring in a quarterback that could even be developed. And so here we are with Tannehill being hurt now for a second year. We don't know when or if he'll be back. And so that's not 100% Adam Gase's fault, but I feel like this team at the management level, this is an assumption on my part, I think they're deferring more so to Adam Gase when it comes to the quarterback position on who he wants for his quarterbacks. And they simply have failed to get anybody behind Tannehill that's even reasonable. And that's going to carry over, and you're seeing it carry over right now, because who's excited to go buy tickets and go watch Brock Osweiler right now at quarterback and go watch an offense that just can't even, stay on the field more than 3 plays? So, even though we won that Jets game, I made the comment, did we really win that game? I mean, we won the game, but I don't have any sense that this team's even remotely competitive with the teams in the top half of the league, and I think we've had some teams on our schedule that are in the bottom half of the league. Right now we have the luxury that both the Jets and the Bills are bad teams. We had the luxury of playing the Raiders, who are a bad team, and we've got some wins in those games, but I think we're a long ways from a playoff caliber team right now. And going into this season with the issues you're starting to see, we saw the Jay Ajayi where Gase moved him along, and so the idea was, well, he was being problematic. We have a young back in Kenyon Drake that had pretty good production in his absence, so it made sense. I can get behind that. And now we come in to this next year, and Kenyon Drake suddenly isn't even being used. I mean, he gets maybe 4 or 5 touches at times in a game, and we're using Frank Gore, and it's one thing if we're playing games where we're being blown out, we're down 14 points or we're down 21 points and you have to throw the ball, but we're playing in games where we've got leads. We're playing in games where it's tight, and we aren't even using our running game in a 50-50 ratio, sometimes not even 60-40 ratio. It's pass. And you're seeing, in my mind, a lack of understanding of Adam Gase on what his players are capable of versus what he's trying to scheme. And so when you lose an offensive tackle, your right tackle or your left tackle, most coaches I've ever seen, you have to adjust your offense. You've got to bring a tight end in tight, and you've got to help that offensive tackle because he will get beat by the defensive ends often. And we've watched Adam Gase march out Sam Young. We watched him march out Stirrup, and we were watching him march Brock Osweiler out there. And we're watching him run 5 linemen shotgun in really close games when you've got Frank Gore and when you're having success moving the football and when you've got an explosive player like Kenyon Drake. And it doesn't really register in my mind is that making sense as you watch your offensive tackle get beat and your quarterback get sacked? I'm just looking at that and I'm like, does he understand he's got a backup tackle in there right now and you can't run the offense that he's running right now? You've got to pound the football and protect it and try to help your defensive out and at least get, a 6-play drive or a 9-play drive and punt, not just march out there, throw 3 incomplete passes and you're punting again. And so again, strategically, I wondered about that. I wondered specifically in the Jets game, we got the ball back with a 7-point lead and there's 5 minutes left in the game. And on that second to last drive, I think he threw 2 out of the 3 times. And I was looking at that and I'm like, wow, our tackles are a disaster right now. They're hurt. We've got Frank Gore who's running really hard and we need to run the clock. And that could have easily impacted the end of that game when the Jets were pushed for time. Had we run even 1 more minute off that clock, strategically we would have been in a lot better shape than trying to throw with backup tackles and Brock Osweiler in that game. And so whether or not I'm wrong or I don't quite get it, I feel like some of these specific instances where I don't quite understand that Adam Gase is understanding how to make his plays that he's coming up with, how to install them properly during the week, and understand what his team is capable and not capable of in terms of his personnel, or is he trying to simply just run his system and he's so lost into the idea that it's his system that succeeds, it's not his team. I think he's got to get back to understanding that side of it, the install factor and the team that he has factors and what they can and can't do. And I think he's asking a lot of backup players or players of lesser talent now more than ever with all the injuries to execute a system that's just not going to happen. So anyway, that's a lot long drawn out, but I tried to give you why I felt he's struggling over the last 3 years statistically and why I feel some of his decision making right now is not really decision making that's going to help this team succeed offensively.
Defendant, you have the floor.
Wow, how do I respond to that? I was trying to take some notes, but I'll tell you the first thing I'm going to say: the Dolphins can still make the playoffs this year. I know that's a bold statement, and I know nobody's excited about that. But guess what?
Mathematically, you're correct. Yeah, I know.
So they are 5-4 right now. They're playing the Buffalo Bills twice, who currently have a 2-7 record, and they're playing the Colts, who have a 3-5 record, who are up and down over the last couple of weeks. That's 8-8 right there, guys. So I know we're all doom and gloom, and I know everybody's thinking, well, the season is over now because the last game we didn't really have an offense, and we've got Brock Osweiler throwing the ball, and and the defense is falling apart, and people are arguing. But guess what? This is the National Football League. Every week you're going to get something different. I mean, if you would have told me before the Chicago Bears game that Brock Osweiler, who was a surprise starting quarterback for that game, was going to start that game, was going to take that game into overtime, and the Dolphins were going to somehow win that game, I would have thought you were crazy, right? But any given Sunday, anything can happen. And listen, I've said it multiple times when we've had these podcasts. The bottom line is you've got professional football players that are on that field. And when they're all doing what they're supposed to be doing, a win is a possibility. Now, I will say a couple of things. Number one, do I think that they're going to make the playoffs? Based on what I've seen, no. Right? Would I love to see them make the playoffs? Sure, yeah. But only if they can get some momentum here between now and the end of the year. But regarding, specifically regarding Adam Gase, there's a reason that Las Vegas is now saying that he's one of the top 3 or 4 coaches in the running for Coach of the Year. I don't know if you guys are aware of that or not.
I'm aware of that. I also saw the same list that also had him on the list of most likely to get fired.
Right. So there's a couple different things that you're looking at here. But, when you look at a coach who has dealt with as much adversity as Adam Gase is, and I'm not making excuses, I'm just stating the facts, all right? When you're dealing with as much adversity as he has dealt with over the last couple of years, and you've got your team to be 5-4 and still possibly able to make the playoffs, leading into week 10 of the season, I think that says a lot about you, right? So when you're looking at what has happened to this team just this year, and we can go back to prior years, we can talk about our Jay Cutler year and all that stuff. And but when you look at specifically this year, on offense, you've lost Daniel Kilgore, Josh Sitton, Marquise Gray, Albert Wilson. Those four are four bona fide starters on your offense. That's 36% of your offense is out for the rest of the year. Should you have a backup?
Even mention Tannehill.
And I didn't mention Tannehill because he's not in the IR yet. But that's another one. So that's 5 out of 11. That's almost 50% of your offense is gone. And even with Brock Osweiler, they've gone 2-2. And yeah, you know what? He's not the best quarterback in the world, but I'm going to share with you some stats that I thought were extremely, extremely eye-popping to me. And I thought to myself, is this even right? And I had to double-check a couple different sites to see that it's right. I did a comparison between Brock Osweiler and Ryan Tannehill. And I actually looked at Ryan Tannehill's last full year as a starting quarterback when he went full 16 games because I wanted to try and get a full year's example. And Brock obviously has had 4 full games so far this season. Brock has thrown for 64% completions, right? Ryan Tannehill, his last full year as a quarterback, was at 62% completion. So Brock Osweiler is 2% higher than Tannehill. Brock Osweiler has a 91% quarterback rating. Tannehill had an 89% quarterback rating his last full year as a quarterback. Brock Osweiler, obviously 6 touchdowns, 3 interceptions. And Ryan Tannehill, 24 touchdowns and 12 interceptions over 16 games. It's actually exactly the same based on how many games Osweiler has started versus Ryan Tannehill. And then average reception, 7.3 yards for Brock Osweiler and 7.2 yards for Ryan Tannehill. So what that means to me, and I know no one likes to see the short drop-off, no one likes to see, Osweiler holding on to the ball and getting sacked 3 or 4 times like he did against the Jets last weekend.
No, that's not even it. I'm tired of seeing him bail out too soon.
Well, but here's the thing. How many times have you seen quarterbacks try not to bail out, try and make a play, and then make a mistake, a la Cam Newton on Thursday night when he throws the pick 6 because he's trying to make a play and he's being tackled at the same time? I would much rather, and I know people don't like to hear this, I'd much rather see him throw it away, punt the ball, versus try and throw a ball down the field that can end up getting intercepted, and then you've basically given up points at that point. And I know a lot of people don't like to hear that, and I know that's not being aggressive, but I have a feeling Coach Gase has gone to Osweiler and said, listen, if you have that opportunity, I would rather you throw it out of bounds than throw it down the field and try and make a play when the play is not there. Now, is Osweiler the answer quarterback? Absolutely not. But the fact of the matter is we're in a situation now where Ryan Tannehill, in my opinion, is out for the rest of the season. And if that is the case, I cannot see him being the starting quarterback for the Dolphins going forward. If they do bring him back, they're going to have to bring him back at a much reduced price because his 2019 salary is going to be $18 million base and then $7 million or almost $8 million in bonuses. And you don't pay a quarterback who's almost missed 2 full seasons, $26 or $27 million in salary. So I think you have to go and you have to find the right quarterback. Either it be through trade and find the right one that is proven to be a successful starting quarterback in the league, or you develop one. And I know Chad had mentioned about, developing a quarterback. I remember our podcast when we were talking about potential late round quarterbacks, and I remember Luke Falk was a name that we were talking about in the draft. Well, just our luck, a couple weeks into the season, Luke Falk was released by his team for one reason or another, and I don't know what the reasoning was, and the Dolphins picked him up. Now, again, he got injured, right, and he's out for the rest of the season. But that is, in my mind, that's a steal, because the Dolphins were looking at trying to get him in the draft, and they couldn't get him in the right round. They didn't get him soon enough, so someone else got him, but they finally got him. So I think there's an opportunity to develop a young guy. I don't know much about Luke Falk, so I'm not going to say he's going to be your answer going forward, but there's an option. There's someone that the Dolphins picked up and said, we can develop this kid. I will tell you the other thing. How many quarterbacks were taken in the first round this past draft? 5, right?
Okay. Yeah, Josh Rosen, Josh Allen, Baker Mayfield, Sam Darnold, and of course Lamar Jackson, who is being heavily campaigned for in Baltimore, mind you.
So let me ask you this: how many of them are successful right now?
Depends on your definition of successful.
How many of them are taking their teams to the playoffs this year?
Okay, if you're talking about taking the league by storm, that would be a resounding 0.
Exactly, and that's my point. And I said that during our pre-draft podcast. I said there is zero guarantee that any quarterback taken in the first round is going to be successful. You've got to have them in the right system. You've got to have the right players surrounding them, and you got to have the right coaches that'll coach them to the right spot. And I'll tell you, Adam Gase is developing the right team around the quarterback. We just have to find the right one. Tannehill, he's past his prime. He's proven that he's proven that he's going to be mediocre at best, and it is time to move on. But I don't think you replace Adam Gase, and I'm going back to the coach, because I think Adam Gase has done everything that he can with the tools and resources that he has to try and be successful. And again, they're at 5-4 this year. Tannehill's missed the last 4 games. So Adam Gase has proven to do a lot with a little. So I'm going to close with one thing though, and one thing I agree strongly with Chad, and I've mentioned this, I want to say for the last 2 years, that I do think Adam Gase should give up offensive play calling. And the reason for that is that when you lead, even if you lead a company and you're not leading a sport or leading a football team, you need to be able to focus on more than one area. You need to be able to focus on multiple areas, and you need to be able to critique and give feedback where it's necessary. And if he's just focusing on the offensive play calling, he is leaving a lot to those other guys, and he's giving a lot of trust to those other assistant coaches to do the right thing. And last weekend was a perfect example that there was an explosion. There was obviously some sort of miscommunication. Someone upset someone. There was something that was not said appropriately, which caused Rashad to pull himself out of the game for half of the game. And Adam Gase should have been right there and been able to address it right away. But he was too busy planning his offensive play calling. So he wasn't there when he needed to be. But I think when we talk about changes for the future years, I think that's the first change that needs to take place for this team. But I would not be fast to give up on Adam Gase just yet.
All right. Now that both sides have had their say, I'm going to go ahead and give my thoughts. Chad and Ian, I completely agree that Adam Gase, the offensive coordinator, needs to go. Adam Gase, the offensive coordinator, is not good at his job. I won't touch the whole Tannehill being mediocre comment because everybody knows how I feel about that. When he's healthy and when he's got a good line, which is pretty much something he's never ever had, really, he's a very good quarterback. But like I said, I had said this once before, and I made this comparison. You bringing up all the numbers for Brock Osweiler, Ian. I will say this about those two. Brock Osweiler has all of the intangibles. He has more of a feel for being quarterback. He has more of an idea of what he should do in situational context. I'll give him that. Ryan Tannehill's not good at that. He'll make mistakes and he'll try to do something he probably shouldn't because he doesn't have the feel for being a quarterback. Well, what Tannehill has over Osweiler is the tangibles. He's got superior arm strength. He's got superior accuracy. He's got superior mobility, superior speed, superior athleticism. So everything that you can measure, Tannehill is better at than Osweiler. He just doesn't have the feel for it. If we could combine the two, if there was a fusion chamber somewhere, and we stuck Osweiler and Tannehill in the box and came out with Brock Tannehill, we would have one of the better quarterbacks in football, I think. But that's something that only happens in science fiction or DC Comics, so I'm just going to go ahead and leave that alone. Adam Gase, for what he is, I have said that he can be a very good head coach. He can be a head coach. I firmly believe he will be a very good head coach for somebody. I don't know if it's going to be for Miami. And the reason I say this is because the way he talks, the way he does things, the way he approaches the game week in and week out, it feels like this man needs to be humbled. This man is very high on himself. He feels like he knows everything. The fact that he even gets into arguments with the media all the time shows that he's very defensive of his decisions. He thinks that he's the smartest man. Bill Belichick, yes, but this is the difference. Belichick actually acts like a head coach, and there's the difference. Belichick, unlike Gase, pays attention to everything. He doesn't stuff his face in a play sheet when the defense is on the field. You people will say that, Belichick is actually a defensive-minded coach. Okay, well, he doesn't just look away when Tom Brady's playing offense, even though, in all honesty, if he really wanted to, he could very easily just say, Tom, go out there and do whatever you want. I'm going to go talk to the defensive players. He could do that, but he doesn't. Because that's not what a head coach's responsibility is. He's supposed to be responsible for everything and keep an eye on everything at all times in order to make sure that everything's going the way he wants it to. That's what a head coach does. So if you want to be Bill Belichick, then you have to act like Bill Belichick. You have to approach the game like Bill Belichick. You cannot be a wannabe Bill Belichick and then just kind of do it your way, because then you're not Belichick. You're somebody else. And that's what Adam Gase is doing right now. He's talking like Belichick would talk, but he doesn't approach it the correct way. Players go to New England to win. They don't go over there to play nice. There was a text, I think it was from Gronk, when Amendola moved to Miami, and it said something along the lines of be free and have fun. What does that tell you? Winning is fun, yes, but you don't enjoy football in New England because Belichick kicks your butt from here to next Tuesday. Adam Gase, he'll kick your butt, but he's trying to be a player's coach on top of that. And you cannot be Bill Belichick and Pete Carroll at the same time. It doesn't work. People don't like Belichick, okay? They don't like playing football in New England. They like the winning that comes with it, but they don't like playing football there. That's why whenever everybody leaves, they talk about how the Patriot way was just, hated it so much. Reggie Wayne signed with New England and retired quickly after because he's like, I can't stand this place. This is awful. Because he wanted to have fun a little bit. It wasn't fun in New England. You either win or get out. That's how it works in New England. Miami I don't know if Gase is even trying to make that atmosphere. I know he's trying to talk about the culture, about we're all in this together, and honestly, the slogan with Stronger Together makes more sense with Gase than it does with Philbin, because Gase is trying to build that mentality. We're all one team, everybody has to execute together. If we don't all execute together, then it's going to fall apart. That's the culture that he's putting together. I can get on board with that. I have no problem with that, because that's the kind of mentality that Belichick has over there, just a lot more strictly. But he doesn't do things Belichick's way. Instead of just shrugging things off when the media tells stuff about him or laughing it off, Gase gets defensive. He feels like he's being challenged. Why do you care? If you're so smart, why do you care what Armando Salguero of the Miami Herald has to say? Why do you care? And this is something else I took issue with, and I actually wrote a piece about it, but I never actually published it because it's like, you know what, it's just not worth it anymore. I took issue with how Adam Gase talked about the Rashad Jones debacle after the game was over. He went to the media, and they asked him, what happened to Rashad? That's basically what they asked him. And this is major paraphrasing, but he basically said, I don't know. I don't know? You're the head coach. How do you not know why Rashad wasn't playing half the game? How do you not know? How did you not end up going to Matt Burke and saying, why isn't Rashad on the field? Is he hurt? Is he pissed off? What's the problem? He didn't even bother to ask. When the Dolphins, right before the Dolphins got their pick six, that was when we saw him on the bench looking at his play sheet, and I made the snarky comment, because usually I try to avoid being snarky during games, but I made the comment. It's like, I wonder if he looked up from his play sheet to find out why the fans were suddenly cheering so loud. Because that's what I've gotten used to with him. He's so busy being an offensive coordinator that he's not paying attention to what he needs to do to be a head coach. You are a head coach. You're not an offensive coordinator. You are responsible for the defense just as much as you are the offense. You want to be Belichick? Again, I say it. Belichick pays attention to everything. Even though he could probably get away with not caring about offense because Tom Brady's over there running it. He don't even need to call plays for him. Brady can call his own plays. But here we are anyway. He does it because that's what his responsibility is. He needs to be humbled. He needs to realize, okay, how I'm doing it isn't working. I need to step back and look at myself. EJ actually wrote a very interesting story about it. That Gase has everything he needs except a mirror. Because I'm not even going to say he's the problem in Miami because he has good traits. But he is not helping himself. Because he's not looking at himself and saying, I need to stop doing this and pay more attention to this. If he's so worried about what the plays are and how the scheme is fitting and all of this other stuff, then he needs to stop. Then he either needs to decide that I can't be a head coach, I need to be an offensive coordinator, and let somebody, if that's what he really wants, then somebody get this man demoted. Let him keep his salary. I don't care. But demote this man to offensive coordinator, which is where he wants to be, and let somebody else come in to handle the day-to-day process. Because if all he's interested in is calling plays, then he's not a head coach. He's an offensive coordinator. And he's not going to learn his lesson until somebody gives him the boot and says, listen, you're not cutting it as a head coach. You got to go. And I think, honestly, I feel like that's the only thing that is going to get him to realize, okay, what I did doesn't work. I need to reevaluate how I coach. And he'll be a better coach for it. I'm sure that he will eventually go somewhere else and he will find success because of the lessons that he learned during his first tenure as a head coach. But that just makes it more frustrating because you realize that Miami, our franchise, was the team that he used to teeth his way through being a head coach. If this is the baby years of Adam Gase and we're like the teething ring, that's frustrating because that means that some other team is going to get to enjoy the fruits of our labor. And that's annoying, because that seems to be what it's always about. We always end up having to be the team that they cut their teeth on, and then as soon as they move on, boom, they get the finished product. It's like, oh, this player's actually good now that we actually have somebody who knows what they're doing. Adam Gase needs to stop being an offensive coordinator, and he needs to be a head coach. Get your head out of that play sheet. Stop looking at how it almost. What is he even writing down when he does that? Is he writing down, I'm going to run this play, and if it doesn't work, punt? Is that what he's doing? Why does he not know what Rashad Jones is doing? And even if the truth is you don't know, don't tell them. Why are you telling them you don't know? Just tell them what Belichick would say. What?
I know exactly what he was writing down on that sheet. He was writing down first down, run, second down, run, third down, short pass, fourth down, punt. It's very simple.
That's what it feels like, doesn't it? That's exactly what it feels like. It's like, we're going to do this.
It's hit on Sunday. Hit on Sunday.
It's like, this is what we're going to do. It doesn't work that way. You have to be aware of what's going on, and you have to be situational about this sort of thing. And you cannot, under any circumstances, give the impression that you don't know what's happening. You are the head coach. You need to know what's happening. Did Joe Philbin even ever say, oh, I don't know what happened? Did he do that? I don't remember him ever saying, I don't know. I would imagine he said, well, something happened.
I would say similar, Lewis, when he said, I had no idea. That
Incognito. With incognito.
Okay, well, that's not so much something that happened during the game. That's something that happened when he wasn't looking. I can be a little more permissive about that because that's something they do in their personal lives. I'm talking about during the game. It's like that's not okay.
To that point too, Lewis. And here's the thing. I think as a leader, right, someone who has to lead a group of men, he has to be careful with what he says without knowing all the facts, right? And I think he absolutely knew what was going on, but I don't think he wanted to comment on it until he knew the facts and until he felt comfortable being able to speak to it. Because if he said, imagine the frenzy that he would have gotten had he said, yeah, I knew Rashad was not playing, and I knew he was healthy. What kind of line of questioning would he have gotten at that point?
It doesn't matter.
Think he was prepared.
Exactly. He wasn't prepared. That's just it. Again, he's talking tough like Belichick, but he's not mentally prepared for what that brings. If you want to be Belichick And if he knew, this is what I said, because everybody was jumping on me saying, why do you need to know so bad? It's like, I don't care I don't care if we know or not. I'm saying it looks bad on him to say, I don't know. Just say, we're keeping it in-house and we will take care of the situation. And that's it. If they ask you again, you repeat yourself. If they ask you 4 more times, you repeat yourself. What did Bill Belichick do in that one press conference? We're on to Cincinnati. We're on to Cincinnati. We're on to Cincinnati. And that's all they got from him. That's all he needed to give. Why do you have to come up with an answer? Don't tell them.
I think, Lewis, I mean, that obviously, I think there's probably a little bit of both to what you're saying. I think Gase had to be aware that he wasn't on the field, but I don't think Gase knew exactly why yet. And that's, I understand that there's a lot going on in the game, but I think it's kind of case in point that most head coaches, if they weren't responsible to be thinking about what's the next 5 or 6 plays I'm going to call, they probably would be a little more aware that, all right, I need to go talk to Rashad Jones, and I need to talk to Matt Burke. I need to figure out what's going on here. One of my star players is off the field. But I don't think he literally has time. I mean, you've got to get your next plays ready. You've got to be evaluating where people are at on the defense and what they're doing. And, again, that's coming back to trying to be the offensive coordinator and the head coach, at the same time. But, I understand both your points. I understand Ian's points. And in the end, they are. The team is 5-4. In the end, Adam Gase is a 500 football coach so far. That's where he's at. You
500 plus 1 now.
Well, yeah, but if you take his overall record, he lost a playoff game. So I think he's exactly.
Oh, yeah, that's true. Okay.
Even in game over or not, I mean, that a 500 football coach usually doesn't go that long in the NFL unless you've got a pretty good track record of having success prior. And to me, like I was leading off earlier, if you want to look at it from a statistical standpoint, I jotted down the stats here where you guys were talking, and I don't know how else to evaluate an offensive coordinator. And so, again, I can get on board with what Ian's saying, that the team has faced a lot of adversity, and they've done well in spite of diversity. So
Gase has led them through leadership pretty darn well. But yes, you're about to bring up his offensive coordinatorism again.
Well, I'm trying to separate those two because, in my opinion, any other offensive coordinator in the league would be getting fired, and here's why. So right now in the league, we are 22nd in points scored. Last year we were 28th. In 2016 we were 17th. Yards per game, we're 28th in the league right now. We were 25th last year. We were 24th in 2016. First downs obtained, we're 29th in the league right now. We were 25th last year. We were 31st the year we made the playoffs.
Oh, my God.
Third down conversions. When you put those together, third down conversions and first downs obtained, if you're bad in both those categories, that means you're very high in 3 and outs. Third downs, we're 29th in the league right now at converting third downs. We were dead last last year, 32nd. In 2016, we were 31st. Those are significant offensive categories that we are one of the worst teams in the league in since Adam Gase has been here. So my argument is saying that we have won in spite of really, really bad offense. So if you want, that's production. If you want to look at the other side, how do you measure execution? Is this team being properly prepared? That's how I'm evaluating coaches. Is this team prepared to execute on Sunday? And I look at penalties. Right now, this is just offensive penalties, so I'm not throwing Matt Burke under the bus here. I'm just looking at Adam Gase as an offensive coordinator. We are the 11th highest team in the league right now on getting offensive penalties. In last year, we were the second highest team. Last year, 2017, there was only one other team in the league that had more penalties on offense than our team. In 2016, we were the fourth highest in the league at getting offensive penalties. You convert that to yards. Right now, we're the 5th highest in the league in giving up penalty yards. That's another reason you're struggling with 3 and outs, because how many times have we seen false start? How many times have we seen holding or whatever illegal formation? Whatever these penalties are, we end up often in 2nd and long and 3rd and long because we're 5th in the league right now in offensive penalties. Last year, we were second overall in the league. We had more penalty yards on offense. We were the second highest, and in 2016, we were the third highest. That tells me this offense in every significant category has been one of the worst offenses in the league the last 3 years, and we're one of the highest penalized offenses in the league the last 3 years. I don't know who else to put that on. You can talk about Ryan Tannehill. You can talk about Jay Cutler. You can talk about Brock Osweiler. You can talk about any specific player. The reality is none of those players contribute to all of that, but Adam Gase does. And I look at this and I'm like, all right, why was Adam Gase sought after, and why was he brought here? Was he brought here because we needed a really strong leader as a head coach? Yes, I think he's provided that. But what is his talent? You know, you're talking about, you're worried about him going to another team and then having a Bill Belichick awakening. I'm not sure who would hire him right now. You're going to hire a guy to be your offensive coordinator who is statistically one of the worst performing, has had one of the worst performing offenses in every major category the last 3 years. I don't know what offensive coordinator can keep their job in that circumstance. And so that's nothing but statistics, and you can look at them as long as you want, but at some point, I'm not expecting Adam Gase to take this team right now that we've had and with the injuries he's had and make them the LA Rams or the Kansas City Chiefs and be like the number 1 or 2 scoring team in the league. I'm just looking at them to be the top half, like 15 or 16th in these categories, and we're not even close. We're one of the worst offenses in the league. And that carries over, and I feel sorry at times for Matt Burke. Is Matt Burke a really good defensive coordinator? I don't know. Maybe
no,
not.
I don't think he's not. Look. I don't mean to cut you off, but when you talk about Matt Burke specifically, all I see is Vance Joseph / Kevin Coyle all over again, because it seems like nothing has changed since those two. So,
right,
but anyway, go ahead.
How do you even fairly evaluate Matt Burke when that's the offense that you're working with? When your team has one of the highest 3 and outs. It's tough because you got to think about it. Like, if your team is not leading, if it's tied or even worse, you're behind, on defense, you have to defend the other team's whole playbook. They can run all they want. They can run play-action passes all they want. They can run any formation they want because they are not under pressure to score points. You as the defense are required to defend their whole playbook they can throw at you. If you're playing defense, you're coordinating defense with a good offense, and let's say you're up 10 points going into the fourth quarter, well, you know that team's playbook suddenly has been shrunken down because they have got to pass. They got to be careful, if they're using certain parts of the field because they don't want to run the clock. You get a much easier offense to defend against because you can kind of tell your defensive ends, crash in, just attack the passer. If they want to run the ball, more power to them. We'll let them run the clock down. How often has Matt Burke been given that luxury of getting to defend an offense with the lead? He very, very rarely has gotten that, and not just him, the coaches before him. I mean, my point being is it's hard for me to judge a defensive coordinator when you're with an offense that consistently is always one of the worst offenses in the league. And you saw that even in the Jets game. That was the point I was making. At the end of that game, we had 2 offensive possessions where we could have run the clock out if we had just converted a few first downs. And we can't even convert a first down. And so I have a tough time. Matt Burke was taking heat, and his defense was the one who scored the touchdown to win the game. If our defense doesn't score, we can't beat the Jets. That's how bad our offense was in that game. So anyway, I look at that, and I'm trying to put in my mind, what is so talented? Why is Adam Gase so highly regarded right now? Because it's not because of our offensive production. And I granted, we grabbed Luke Falk. That's at least somebody that maybe he can develop. But the only quarterback he's really developed would be Tannehill, and he hasn't even physically been able to play. And so I still question, why are our backup quarterbacks are these guys like Jay Cutler and Matt Moore and Brock Osweiler when we have Adam Gase? Is it because he doesn't feel the need to develop a guy, or is it because maybe he's not quite sure how to actually develop rookie quarterbacks, so he's just taking a veteran? And this isn't just a trend that I've seen Adam Gase do with quarterbacks. Let me throw some names at you. You've got Charles Harris. He's our first-round draft pick, right? Really talented guy. We go out
back in 2017.
17? Fine. So he's our first-round pick. I would expect a coaching staff to develop our first-round pick to be an every-down starter. I expect that of a coaching staff to get him ready. We don't do that. We go sign Robert Quinn instead because another coaching staff has already got him ready. We can play him right now. We have Cordell Tankersley, who is now gone.
Cordray Tankersley, yeah.
So he was playing at the end of last year. Tall, fast, has the actual physical ability to be a boundary corner. Did he just not get developed because he got beat by Torrey McTyer, another team's player, got put in front of him?
Torrey's an undrafted free agent.
Okay, so was he ever on another team even? I'm just trying to figure out
I don't recall.
How he's ahead of a guy as talented as Tankersley. The point I'm making is I don't think the coaching staff was able to actually develop and coach Cordell Tankersley. We have Kenyon Drake, who he's been on the team a few years. He's been basically put back in favor of Frank Gore because Frank Gore's already been coached. Our coaching staff, in my opinion, has not been able to teach Kenyon Drake what they feel he needs to know to be getting the reps because he's clearly a much faster player than Frank Gore is, and he's much more likely to give you a first down or points than Frank Gore is.
Well, but yes and no. Okay, speaking strictly for Gore, if this were another Arian Foster situation, I would be completely on board with you. But Gore has actually been producing, so I don't.
I don't disagree. My point is the coaching staff was not able to develop Kenyon Drake to be producing. Devontae Parker. He's playing now. He was about traded. We went and we signed Albert Wilson and Danny Amendola because our coaching staff is unable to get Devontae Parker ready to play. Whether it's his health, you can claim that, but when he was healthy, he wasn't playing. He was put out in favor of, again, players that have been coached by other coaches that we signed as free agents. We draft Mike Gesicki, our second overall pick. We're picking up O'Leary, who was coached by Buffalo, to start ahead of him in a lot of places. Jordan Phillips, he's gone because he talked too much. We had 2-3 years of him now to develop. We're just basically cutting him in favor of Ziggy Hood. Osweiler, Cutler, again, these are quarterbacks that have been coached by other people that we're bringing in.
Including Gase, by the way.
Including Gase, but again, I'm thinking if he is so good at developing quarterbacks, and quarterbacks are so viable, why would we not be drafting a guy right now? And I think that's hurting us.
Would you like a theory?
Yeah.
All right. Ian, I'll let you chime in after I finish giving my thoughts. And this is speculation. I don't have any insider information. I never claimed to. And if I did have insider information, I would say so. And you guys would have to believe me because I've never claimed it before. Except for this one time where I knew that there was going to be uniform changes because I knew somebody. But anyway, my theory as to why Gase does not bring in, actual competition, so to speak, an actual person to develop, this is what I think it is. It has everything to do with the controversy. It has everything to do with the controversy. Again, he wants to be Bill Belichick. He wants to be the tough guy who always has all the answers, and anybody else who disagrees with him is just wrong, right? But again, this is what I was saying earlier. Gase does not approach the game like Belichick. Gase wants to just go through unquestioned, bow down before his genius because he's just that good. He doesn't want to be questioned. He doesn't feel like he doesn't want to handle what comes with that. Why does every time somebody brings up something about Tannehill, he gets defensive? This is Brock Osweiler. So I knew that this would eventually happen. I knew that eventually something would happen. They would say, well, Brock Osweiler hasn't been worse than Tannehill. What happened with Gase? Gase went ballistic. Why? Why do you feel the need to do that? Are you feeling defensive over your choice of backup quarterback, or are you feeling defensive that you feel like your starting quarterback is maybe not as good as you feel like he should be? Or are you dreading the idea of addressing what might be a QB controversy or even a QB competition? Does that make you upset? Does that make you nervous? Does that make you feel uncomfortable? Why would you ignore the perfectly open free agent in Teddy Bridgewater and let him go to the Jets, knowing that you were going to let Matt Moore go, knowing that you might need a backup quarterback because Ryan Tannehill may get injured again? Because for all the talk about who's better between Bridgewater and Tannehill, You can argue back and forth however much you want. I personally think Tannehill is pretty much on the same level as Bridgewater, but that's just it. They're on the same level. So what happens if Bridgewater comes in as opposed to Osweiler? Who is going to argue that Brock Osweiler is better than Ryan Tannehill? Nobody. Except for after he's already gone and Osweiler has one good game and suddenly everybody's singing his praises because it's a different face. It's that's all it took was just one good game from somebody who's not Ryan Tannehill, and everybody was suddenly screaming about a competition, an actual one. And even I had said, looks like he's about to start a controversy. Which, in now that you look at it, he did. He did start a controversy. Does he deserve it? Probably not. Osweiler's not that great. But he did, and Gase lost it. He doesn't need to do that. He didn't want Bridgewater. He didn't want Bridgewater. He doesn't want Kaepernick. He didn't bring in Cutler until after Tannehill went down because he doesn't want the controversy. He doesn't want the drama that goes with it. He doesn't want to answer those tough questions. He doesn't. That's my personal theory as to why Gase never seems to bring in anybody. If they had drafted a quarterback, what would immediately be the storyline? So if or when will the rookie quarterback overtake his starter, Ryan Tannehill? When will he be able to? How is the rookie quarterback doing? Will he ever get a chance to start in a game? Those are questions Gase doesn't want to answer, and I think that's why he never does it. He's going to have to dump Tannehill altogether, which I don't think he's going to do because he's tied his career so far to Tannehill. The only way that Gase brings in somebody different is if Tannehill goes first.
Yeah, I mean, that's the quarterback specifically, Lewis. I'm making the point of who, as a coaching staff, not just Adam Gase, but his whole staff, are they actually developing our players? Like, are they actually coaching them? It's one thing for Adam Gase to be scheming offensive plays. And I have no doubt that as a guy who draws up plays, Adam Gase knows what he's doing. He absolutely does. He's a smart guy when it comes to offensive strategy. But there's a lot more to that with a team. I mean, when you draft a guy, are they being properly coached and are they being properly developed? And I look at the team and, look at our offense and who are guys we've drafted that have been developed. That was the point I'm making with Kenyon Drake. Kenyon Drake is much, much faster than Frank Gore. And obviously, Kenyon Drake in limited touches has scored touchdowns this year on long runs and passes. I'm just wondering, where was the ball drop? Why is Kenyon Drake in his third year not really breaking out right now, being a developed back, and why are we having a 35-year-old back just immediately plopped in front of him? Same thing with Devontae Parker. Has he actually been coached? In practice, are they actually teaching him how to run routes, how to get off press coverages? Because I see like some of the things Devontae Parker do, I'm seeing the same stuff out of Mike Gesicki, where they're kind of running lazy routes that give D-backs much easier angles to defend him on. That's what I'm trying to figure out. Like, and on the defense too, with Charles Harris and Tankersley, I'm making the point where I'm questioning whether or not they're fundamentally coaching these people and players on what to do. When we were watching the Houston game, I was actually laughing because they went into the sideline and they gave us an audio and visual of our defensive back coach on the sidelines because we're getting torched, right, in the Houston game. You've seen whether it was all his fault or not. Who was our Bobby McCain? Bobby McCain had a really rough game, and we had broken coverages going on in that game, and so they jump over to the coach. I don't see the coach out with a clipboard. I don't see the coach even talking to a specific defensive back. This is our specialist, our defensive back specialist, and he's basically telling them, go get it. Step up and go get it. And play harder. Play harder. And I've coached little kids, and I think about this. I see this mistake made with guys coaching kids that are in Little League baseball or middle school baseball, and the pitcher's out there, and he throws a ball or two, and the coach yells, "All right, throw strikes." And one thing you learn as coaching is you don't tell people stuff they already know. You're not helping them. And because the pitcher's thinking, well, no, throw strikes. Sorry for my French. But the defensive backs are already thinking that. So our defensive back coach, his methodology of coaching is basically to telling them, play harder. And I'm thinking, I don't know that they even know who they're supposed to be covering in certain schemes right now. I don't know that they've been coached on where they're supposed to be. I don't know if they've actually spent a lot of time in practice actually just teaching them fundamental how to be a defensive back. I don't know that. And that's obviously an acute instance on the sideline, but he absolutely wasn't coaching. I guess you could say he was trying to motivate them to play harder. That's all he was doing, though. And if your defensive back coaches needed to motivate your guys to play harder, there's more problems there than just scheming, I guess. But I'm just questioning the coaching, and that's why I'm being so critical of Adam Gase on these different levels. It's not just statistically we're being poor. I am questioning some of the play calls based on the situational points in the game. I want to make those points. Well, Adam Gase makes good play calls too. I mean, sometimes he comes up with very dynamic and creative plays.
Yes, and those are the only ones we seem to score on. It takes Danny Amendola throwing a football to get a touchdown.
Well, I'm fine with that, but again, when you're struggling and who your personnel, that was just the point I was going to make. When it's a game like the Jets game and points are at a premium and your tackles are now hurt and your quarterback is not Aaron Rodgers, it's Brock Osweiler, I would be trying to pound the ball with Frank Gore and get the ball to Kenyon Drake, because there's a good chance Kenyon Drake will break off a big run, and then you've just got 3 more downs. I'm not trying to put Stirrup out on an island against a defensive end and expect Brock Osweiler to do something amazing. Brock Osweiler is not that much different than Tannehill. Ian's got a great point. You can't expect Brock Osweiler to win football games when the defense is completely playing pass and crashing in from the edge. You've got to be able to call plays and use formations that help protect these guys. And I'm just not seeing that. But then that's strategy where I'm questioning Adam Gase, and then I'm going one step further and saying, who is this coaching staff developing? Like next year, who's our stars going to be next year? Brock Osweiler may not even be on the team next year. So if you're not really making a hard playoff run, you're doing yourself no favors starting Brock Osweiler right now versus having somebody you could have drafted that you're developing. You're not doing your team next year any favors putting Kenyon Drake on the bench and playing Frank Gore real heavily. It's not helping you next year develop a player. It doesn't help you to have O'Leary playing ahead of Mike Gesicki. And maybe they're thinking, like, the thinking is you're always in it, and maybe Adam Gase is trying to save his job, but our young talent should be on the field more and be developed, I think, versus what we're doing right now. To me, we're Adam Gase is doing everything he can to try to get this team to 8-8 or 9-7. And I understand Ian's point, we're still in it statistically, but I don't think we really are, because if you look at the playoffs right now, I'm going to pull up here. So the number 1 seed in the AFC right now is the Kansas City Chiefs. They're 8-1.
I'm picking them to win the Super Bowl, doggone it.
New England right now is 7-2. They already got a win against us. I think everybody's pretty confident we're not going to beat the New England Patriots to win the AFC East. They'd have to really have a meltdown because we're already 2 games behind them, and our best we can do is split with them. Pittsburgh is 5-2 as a 3 seed. The 4 seed is the Houston Texans. Guess what? They have a head-to-head win against us. So if we have to win in a wild card, Houston has us beat. The number 5 seed is the Chargers at 6-2. And the 6th seed is, guess what? The Cincinnati Bengals. Again, they've already beat us head-to-head. We're not going to be able to win a wild card against the Bengals. And so we probably, realistically, to make the playoffs, would have to be 10-6 because we can't beat the other teams that are in the wild card spots right now head-to-head. And so I'm watching teams like the Detroit Lions. Detroit Lions are probably still in the playoff picture, but they're trading off Golden Tate, and they're getting draft picks. And I'm just questioning, like, I feel very confident we had a trade in place for Devontae Parker, because look at the receiver movement that happened at the trading deadline. And literally the day after the Wilson injury, Devontae Parker got pulled off the table, and suddenly there was a number 1 pick going to the Raiders for Amari Cooper. So that's the other issue I have with Gase right now. Are we actually making decisions that are trying to get this team ready to make a hard playoff push? Or are we trying to be 8-8 or 9-7 and save our job? I think that's a legitimate question to ask strategically. What are we doing with our team right now? Because Frank Gore is not going to help us next year, more than likely. I don't know that Frank Gore is going to help us that much later into this year. He's a good back. I don't get me wrong. He's going to be a Hall of Famer. He runs hard, but he just can't do what Kenyon Drake can do. Kenyon Drake probably runs with a 4.4 speed. He's very, very dynamic. And so when I hear Adam Gase responding to being questioned about that with, I've got to find ways to get Kenyon Drake the ball more, I'm looking at that like, you've had 3 years with him on your team. All you've got to do is put in a run play and turn on and hand him the football. It's not that hard. But yet he's chosen not to, again, because I think he's worried about trying to get to 500 this year. He's not worried about trying to win against some of these teams. I mean, I don't think you can feature Frank Gore as your running back, who's basically been the number 2 running back on a team for the last 4 or 5 years, and expect to compete with a team like Kansas City, expect to compete with a team like New England or even Pittsburgh. You've got to have a direction. To me, like, what's the point of trying to get to 8-8 or 9-7? We've had 4 or 5 coaches in a row that can get 8-8. We want an actual competitive playoff football team, and I just don't see the decisions being made going forward that are going to get us there right now with the players we have out there on the field. I want to see them developing the players that we're drafting and seeing them come forward and by the end of the year being leaders of this team. Maybe that will happen, but I don't know. I mean, maybe you guys can tell me. I mean, Mika Fitzpatrick, maybe James Baker. Granted, those are on the defensive side of the ball, but who have we brought in the last 2 or 3 years that we've developed, that Adam Gase's coaching staff offensively has developed to be a very Pro Bowl type caliber offensive player?
Ian?
So, do you want me to answer the question, or can I talk about some other things too?
I mean, go for it. Whatever's on your mind, because you sounded like you were just like...
Yeah, well, and because, and I know we talk about them coaching and developing their own players, and we talk about, we've talked about before about, not taking somebody else's players that have been coached up somewhere else. And, I look around the team and I look and I say, well, Laremy Tunsil is continuing to develop as a player. He's an offensive player, right? We did develop Jarvis Landry, even though we did, let him go. We did develop Jay Ajayi. Right. We did develop Jay Ajayi and used him, and that was a usage by Coach Gase. We've developed Kenyon Drake, although we're not using him as much this year. Again, that may be the largest mystery of the season, why, they're not pounding the ball with him as much as they were in the past. And then you look at the defensive side of the ball, you got, Bobby McCain's of the world, the Xavier Howards of the world, right? And I know that Rashad has been here for a couple of different tenures. You look at your Jerome Baker, you look at your Mika Fitzpatricks, there's guys out there, and I would love to be able to say, that everybody that you're going to get in the draft is going to be a contributor. Obviously, that's the goal, right? That's why you're drafting guys, because you want them all to contribute, but it sometimes takes some time. Other times, it doesn't work out. Sometimes the guys end up spending a lot of their time on the practice squad until they have that opportunity. I know this week, I think today, as a matter of fact, I saw, Asiata.
Yes, Isaac Asiata got promoted. Squad. I don't know if he's going to play, but he's there.
Hey, you know what? It's an opportunity for the kid who's been fighting for 2 years, and they've been training him for 2 years to try and get to this level. So
but that's just
they're going to give him the opportunity.
Ian, are you confident that he'll play on Sunday, or are you just going to assume? Or are they just going to throw out Jake Brendel or Wesley Johnson?
I don't know. I think it's going to be a rotation. I think that's the way they normally do it. I don't think he's going to start. I don't think it makes sense for him to start, but I think it's going to be a good rotation. You want to have fresh legs on the line. So
a rotation at guard during a game?
Possibly, if necessary.
I wasn't shocked. I mean, it's easy to sit here and be critical, but personally, everything I've read about Asiata is that he struggles in pass protection, but he's a good drive run blocker.
Right. That was the thing that I wanted to do is the whole time. I keep getting nailed by Neil Driscoll. I mean, the guy is. I mean, I know a lot of people have disagreements with him. So do I. But he was the first one who basically said, "You guys are nuts for thinking Larson was any good, despite the film review." Well, and he turned out to be right on it. But
here's the thing, Louis. Like, I'm going back to the situational. So here we are. Just in the last 2 weeks, we've had a 4.5 yard where we passed and failed. And we have Asiata on our practice squad, not even dressed. And I'm looking at that and I'm thinking, if we had Asiata dressed and we put him in just in that circumstance, just on a half a yard, he doesn't have to pass block. He just has to drive back forward, and can we execute a quarterback sneak behind him? I just question, like, why wouldn't we be doing that? But with going along with Ian, I absolutely agree. He named off several names of defensive players, Xavier Howard, Baker. I think Fitzpatrick clearly is going to be a star. We've had several defensive players that we've drafted that have developed. It's the flip side that has me concerned, because I feel pretty confident saying I don't think Adam Gase had a whole lot to do with developing the defensive players we have on the field.
That was what I was thinking too. Is like all those defensive players. Again, Gase has shown he doesn't care what happens on defense. On offense, he's not even paying attention.
I'm just looking at, and Laremy Tunsil's good. Granted, I feel like if he probably was the number one rated offensive tackle in that draft. We got lucky that he fell with the incident, and
we're lucky. You know what else? We're also lucky that he finally kind of woke up, because it was starting to look like he was going to bust too.
Well, that's kind of my point. Is he's incredibly talented. He's the number one rated offensive tackle in the draft. So yeah, I'm glad that he's out playing and not on the bench. But I'm looking at the rest of our offense, and I'm just asking that question on who have we brought in that has been developed that's a Pro Bowl caliber offensive player. Ryan Tannehill hasn't played enough, but I don't think when he has played that he's been a Pro Bowl quarterback. I mean, he hasn't been bad.
He was for the first 2 weeks of the season.
He was for the first.
He just hasn't been able to play. I can't be fair on Gase or Tannehill. He just hasn't played enough to know. But we definitely have not had a Pro Bowl quarterback under Adam Gase. I can say that. We haven't had very many at all. We had Jarvis Landry, who we basically run out of town. Granted he wanted a lot of money, but he at least was a Pro Bowl caliber player.
What's he doing in Cleveland?
Well,
I'm okay with giving him up.
I am too, but I'm just making the point of where are the Pro Bowl players that Adam Gase is developing on offense? He's had 3 years here. Shouldn't Kenyon Drake be maybe a Pro Bowl caliber running back, and he's not even getting yards? Shouldn't Devontae Parker be, from a talent standpoint, a Pro Bowl caliber wide receiver? He's not even cracking the starting lineups. Mike Gesicki, he doesn't look anywhere close to a Pro Bowl caliber tight end. Maybe he'll develop later. I'm just not seeing
Jakeem Grant. I've been so mad about how underutilized Jakeem Grant is.
And yeah, is it schema? I'm just making the point is, what is Adam Gase here for again? And I think we're all in agreement right now that the biggest problem right now is we have a really bad offensive coordinator, and Adam Gase is the head coach, so he has the power to decide that, and it's him, and he's not going to fire himself. But the reason this team is struggling to move forward right now is we're not developing offensive players. We're not having offensive production.
We're not utilizing. Chad, I think the biggest issue I'm having with your argument is not so much the development of players. I think it's the utilization. Because if we're talking about developing them, then that's a different story, I think. Because developing them means that they have the talent. Kenyon Drake was not as strong of a product as he was when he first got here. He developed, he just hasn't been used. The same goes for Grant. The same goes for other players, such as, again, Jay Ajayi, who suddenly woke up when Gase decided, oh, I have a running back, might as well use him, and suddenly he became the next superstar in the league. He fell off right after that because of his whole knee thing, but he realized that he had a player and used him. And then when Kenyon Drake came in there and he started getting used, it's like, oh, he's there. And that's why it becomes so much more egregious now, because we know the reality of what Kenyon Drake can do. I don't think it's so much the development of the players. I think it's how they're being used. It almost feels like Gase doesn't want to show what it is that he's got under his sleeve so that they don't expect it. But if you want to win, you have to be able to use those players for what they're used for. Use Kenyon Drake in open space. You let Kenyon Drake bounce it outside, because that's what was working earlier in the year. Every time Drake got the ball and ran outside, he got at least like 6-7 yards out of it. So why did he stop doing that? That's the question you need to ask. Why did he stop doing what works? I don't think it's the development of players. I think it's how he's using them, because he has players who can do stuff. He has plenty of players who have the ability to do amazing things when given the opportunity. He's just not giving the opportunity.
I don't disagree with you, Lewis, but again, that's the case. The point is then what you're saying is this is not Chris Gear and Reich Tannenbaum. You feel like over the last 3 or 4 drafts, those guys have done a pretty good job of acquiring talent for our team. It comes back to Adam Gase. Who are your players? What positions are you putting them in to win? And are you installing plays that they can execute and succeed at? And I'm not seeing that. That's that point. Whether you're looking at it statistically, we're not succeeding, or whether you're looking at it that what players have we brought in that we've developed to be Pro Bowl caliber, or at least top half of the league sort of players. And we're jumping away from that. We're starting Danny Amendolas, we're starting Frank Gore's. And, you look back in history, has Frank Gore in a long while been a dominant force in the running game? Is he a guy you go into a football game and the defense goes, we have got to figure out how we're going to stop Frank Gore? I mean, he's not a Todd Gurley. He's not that kind of a player. So why are we suddenly having to play him over Kenyon Drake? And whether that's, I don't know. I assume Kenyon Drake's not picking up the assignments, and to me, that goes back to coaching. Does that mean you're unable to get him ready to play? Is it the player or the coaches? And as time is playing out here, Lewis, we're seeing players cut. We're seeing players swapped out in favor of veteran players. I personally am starting to feel more and more like it isn't the players that are the problem, it's the coaching. And I think you're starting
to disagree.
Well, I agree, but so we're starting to see more and more players like Rashad Jones, like Jordan Phillips that are gone, like J.J. They're speaking out against Adam Gase and they're having troubles. Is that what's going on in-house?
Well, Rashad never said specifically Gase was a problem.
Well,
he said he was frustrated.
Whatever.
We'll never know what it really was.
My question, though, is at what point is it Matt Asiata is just not good enough to beat out Ted Larson, so it's the player, or Kenyon Drake's not good enough to beat out Frank Gore, so it's the player. Devontae Parker's not good enough to play ahead of Danny Amendola, so it's the player. At what point is it the coaching or not? Because I personally think Devontae Parker is much more talented than Danny Amendola, and I think Kenyon Drake's much more talented than Frank Gore. But yet our coaches can't figure out how to get them on the field and put them into positions to succeed. So they're going with veterans that have already been coached in other systems that already know what they're doing because they've already been coached. And so I get that. Danny Amendola probably knows what routes to run a lot better than Devontae Parker. And Frank Gore probably knows which holes to hit better than Kenyon Drake, and also knows where to pass block better than Kenyon Drake. I'm just questioning, Kenyon Drake's not a rookie. Devontae Parker's not a rookie. Why are these guys not prepared? That's the questions I'm having, because I feel like our coaching staff is failing at preparing the more talented players on our team right now.
I think so I know, to answer your question, Lewis, from before, why are they not using players a certain way, or why, is it the schemes? Is it not? Take a moment for one second, and this is kind of fantasy, and I'm playing fantasy right now.
Okay, let's do hypothetical.
Let's say Daniel Kilgore didn't get hurt. Let's say Josh Sitton didn't get hurt. Let's say Marquise Gray, who was going to be your starting tight end, didn't get hurt. Let's say Tannehill was back healthy and he didn't get hurt, right? What does this team look like, and do they need to make as many changes as they're making today, right? Because what has happened is, as every week has gone by, as you've lost another player, that makes them have to change their scheme even more to focus on, well, who's my stronger offensive lineman? Should I run to the left or should I run to the right? Should my quarterback run to the left, or should my quarterback really focus on running to the right? There's a lot of things that have now had to be changed because of the injuries that this team has had to endure. And I'll tell you, I looked at some of the other teams that, I just wanted to compare, right? So right now, starting offense and starting defense, we had 8 guys altogether, 4 on offense and 4 on defense that would be considered starters right now. And 11 guys, 15 guys altogether when you add them all up. The next closest team to us was the New England Patriots with 14 guys, but the majority of them were backups, so the majority of them were practice squad players, so they really didn't make an impact on the team. I wish we were the Buffalo Bills. They have 3 guys that are on injured reserve right now. what kind of difference would our team look like right now if the majority of our guys that are on injured reserve would not be? And again, people are going to say, well, you're just making excuses. I'm not making excuses. These guys are starters for a reason.
Okay.
Right? We've got 36% of our backups in right now.
I would agree. I would agree with your argument if we still didn't. If I would agree with your argument if we didn't see what we were seeing before still working. Like, why did we stop bouncing out Kenyon Drake outside? Why did he suddenly stop getting the ball more? And when we do see him get the ball, he's still able to do something with it. And that's the thing that frustrates me, Ian. It's not so much that I get the injury angle. I get it. We've been beat to hell and back about getting the injuries. We got it. We know. It's very hard to do what he's doing with what he's got. However, knowing that it still works, he doesn't do it. Bounce Kenyon Drake outside. Why are you when Kenyon Drake does get the ball, they're giving him the ball to go run up the middle. That's Gore's job. Why are you making Drake run like a power back? He's not. He's a speed back who goes outside and beats guys to the corners to get 6 or 7 yards. Why did he stop doing that? That has mind you, the right side of the offensive line is still intact. Okay? So you still got Jawan James and Jesse Davis there. Why did he stop doing it? I don't know. Why did he stop doing it? I don't have an answer for you. And mind you, up until Larson's injury, the left side of the line was also pretty much the same past week one. And past week one, they were still giving the Kenyon Drake the ball, bouncing outside and getting yards. Why did they stop? I don't have an answer for you, and that's why it's frustrating. Why did they stop giving the ball to Jakeem Grant? Like, let him get the ball in space and run and outrun people. Why did they stop doing that? He's the ultimate. Every time they give him a screen pass, Jakeem Grant, he gets like 6 or 7 yards out of it just on pure speed alone. That is the most successful this Dolphins team has been on bubble screens the entire time that Gase has been here. Why does he keep trying to give screen passes to Danny Amendola and Devontae Parker, who are not built for that sort of thing? Why does he keep doing stuff that doesn't work and ignoring the stuff that we know for a fact does, regardless of how many injuries have been out there? The players who do make it happen are still there. Grant, Drake, those guys, and he's not letting them play, and that's what is frustrating. Regardless of injuries, that's when it becomes kind of an excuse, because you're seeing, well, Drake is still there, Grant is still there, Gesicki is still there. Why are you not putting them in positions to do what they do best?
I think with that, Lewis, I think what you're saying is kind of the same thing I'm saying. I think part of the issue, again, is I think, this is just my opinion and my critique of Adam Gase, I think he is so focused on scheme. I think he's trying to look at what other defenses are doing, and he's trying to develop offensive plays to counter what they do. And I think he's getting lost. What you get lost in the mix of what do you have on your team that they can do. And I think that's where the disconnect's at. And I think that's part of the issue with Kenyon Drake is Adam Gase has decided, here's how I'm going to attack this defense. But Kenyon Drake doesn't run that play right all the time. He hits the wrong hole, or he doesn't slam it in the hole. He tries to reverse course, or he's messed up some pass blocks. So I'm not going to use Kenyon Drake. I'm going to use Frank Gore so I can run this play. I think he does the same thing with a lot of players. And so, to me, that's just the backwards way of approaching it, is you've got to look at who are the most talented players on my team. And then from there go, what do I do to utilize these players to put them in a position against this other team? And I don't think Adam Gase thinks that way. I think he looks at, here's the play I want to use against this team. Who on my team is the best at being able to execute this play? And I think what happens then is that's when you end up with your Frank Gores and your Danny Amendolas, because they cognitively understand what they're supposed to do on the play. But my point is okay, so if you scheme it right and Frank Gore runs for 4 or 5 yards, they do that a lot, and then they go away from it. But my thought is, if it's a play scheme to Kenyon Drake, there's a much, much greater chance that Kenyon Drake's going to rip off a 40-yard run for a touchdown than Frank Gore. We've watched him do it in limited carries this year. I'm criticizing that in my opinion, as a coach, you have got to figure out what plays Kenyon Drake can execute without getting penalties, or without blowing assignments, and you need to get those plays installed and get the player ready. It's not, this player isn't able to get ready for what I want to do. And I think that's Adam Gase's mentality. I think you kind of hit it on the report, or on the head with it being maybe a little egotistical, that Adam Gase has decided that his play calling schemes are so good that he just needs guys that can execute his teams to succeed. And it kind of leaves at the wayside the talent side of it. Is who are your most talented players, who are your playmakers, and how do you do that? And granted, this is a whole different era, but you think back with Don Shula, when he was so successful in the 70s, and he was running power football. He had 3 backs, and he just pounded. And in that era, they maybe would pass 10, maybe 15 times a game, and they just pounded the football. I think a lot of coaches, it's easy to think that, well, the reason we were so good is because I called all these running plays. And you start to lose fact of, actually the reason you were so good is you were pounding the ball with Larry Zonka, Mercury Morris, and Jim Kick behind Larry Little. You had a very good personnel to run a power running game. But then you get into the 80s, and Don Shula realizes that, wow, like Dan Marino is really good at throwing the football. We have some good receivers. He completely changes his strategy to feature Dan Marino, Mark Duper, Mark Clayton, because they're very, very talented players. And so Adam Gase is really being pressured now because he doesn't have the personnel. And I know that sucks. It makes it tough, but every team does go through it. Maybe not to the extent the Dolphins that went through it, but you don't get to have always personnel that can just execute the plays that you specifically want, that have the skill set that are necessarily going to fit well with it. And that's, I think, the problem right now. And we're just seeing these 3-and-outs and really just inept offense right now. And to me, that's obvious, is you just don't have the personnel anymore. We absolutely don't have the offensive line. We don't have an offensive line to throw the number of passes that Adam Gase throws per game. And honestly, I feel like, considering the shape the offensive line is, we've run pretty well. But Adam Gase, scheme-wise, doesn't want to run the football. He wants to throw the football, and he doesn't really want to accept that we don't have the offensive line right now to protect our quarterbacks. We don't have a quarterback that can succeed with a bad offensive line. We just don't have the personnel to do it. And you're seeing that. You're seeing quarterbacks get sacked. You're seeing holding penalties. You're seeing false start because you're having offensive linemen that are having to block defenders that are playing pass. And that's just, it's so hard for the offensive linemen, especially when they're injured, like our offensive linemen are right now, if they just don't have the talent level. And you know what? How much can you blame Ted Larson? How much can you blame Zach Stura? I mean, they're not that talented of football players. They're developing. They don't have a lot of experience, and to put them out there,
some of them just are not that good because Larson's been around for a while.
Well, yeah, I'm just making the point. They're not that good, and that's not their fault. That's not Adam Gase's fault. But you've got to be able to change up your philosophy and run plays that at least have some success. And the way the offense is performing, it's just not happening. So either our offense is incredibly devoid of talent. That's why we're statistically one of the worst offenses in the league. Or Adam Gase just is not putting that together. And if I thought it was Adam Gase didn't know how to scheme, I would say that. I don't think that's the case. I think Adam Gase, what he's coming up with, probably are good schemes against what the defenses are doing. I honestly think that. I think he's talented. I think when he's sitting there scribbling on his play stroke, I think he's writing down what they're doing. I think he's making notes on what he wants to come back to. And I think he's probably making decisions from a strategical standpoint that aren't bad. I just don't think he has the team that can execute what he's wanting them to do. And, I kind of equate that back to golf.
But hold on, we got to wrap it up soon. But just talking about that right there, you just said that you think the schemes could work, and he doesn't have the personnel. Okay, but that was what this whole past off season was about: finding the personnel to do it. Gesicki was supposed to be able to run those seam threats that Julius Thomas was supposed to be able to do. He's not letting him try. And then, of course, the whole running the ball, throwing the ball. Those are things that was what this whole offseason was dedicated to, getting those players that made the scheme work. So once again, I have to ask the question: well, if the schemes are so special, then why is it that he jettisoned everybody who wasn't good and kept these guys, and it's still not working?
I think it's because he is not his scheming is not able to be executed by the players that he's had since he's been here. And I think he has struggled with that every single season. I think the first season when we went like 1-4 or whatever before we had the run, I think that was a common thing is he said I have to scale back the playbook. And to me that's saying I am calling plays my team cannot execute. And I think he's still struggling with that right now. Again, he isn't adjusting to the personnel that he has.
So what's the solution? Hold on. So what's the solution if that's the case? Find more players who can run his scheme, or should he change his scheme?
I think it's on him to change the scheme. I understand they've got a lot of hurt players, but right now, I think statistically the ineptness of the offense, how bad our offense is performing on 3-and-outs, getting first downs and third down conversions. I think you at some point got to realize I don't have Peyton Manning at quarterback right now. I've got Brock Osweiler. I don't have an all-pro offensive line. I've got a below-average offensive line right now, and that means you've got to go conservative. You might have to run a lot of double tight formations and just pound Frank Gore. It's boring. It doesn't score instantly, but get the ball to Kenyon Drake more and run 2 out of 3 plays and hope that he can break it.
Just a reminder, that's what they did on Sunday because that's what they had to do.
That's the point.
They play conservative. That's exactly what they did.
I don't think
they're doing exactly what you're recommending. And that's what they have to do because Osweiler's not going to throw the ball more than 20 yards down the field
and make a
good pass.
I don't think they ran out of anything but shotgun primarily against the Jets. I don't.
So So you're talking about the formation, not so much what they did. You don't want them to run out of shotgun. You want them to run.
Absolutely. You've got tackles that are hurt. You've got backup offensive tackles. I want a tight end right beside my tackle. I don't want my quarterback Brock Osweiler in a shotgun without anybody out there helping my tackles. I want Brock Osweiler under center. I want tight ends in tight in run formations and pound the football. And if that doesn't work and you go 3-and-out, fine. At least you're running the clock. At least you're putting Frank Gore, and at least you're not letting backup offensive tackles lose the game for you, and you're not letting an average quarterback try to win the game. And that, to me, that's what you should be doing right now with the personnel. That's me sitting, at home in my armchair. But I'm just saying, the offense and schemes that Adam Gase are marching out there, the players can't do it. They don't have the talent, and they're not prepared to do it. And that's obvious statistically. That's why we're one of the highest penalized teams, and that's why we're doing so many 3-and-outs. Is that's the bottom line. This team does not have the capability to execute the offensive game plans and plays that Adam Gase is calling. I mean, that's just the unfortunate situation he's in, and he's been in that the last few years, as Ian pointed out. He hasn't had a really good quarterback, and he hasn't had a good offensive line. But he's continuing to call plays that require that to succeed.
All right, well, we're going to go ahead and wrap this up. I think we've pretty much gotten all of our thoughts out for the most part. I know that, Ian, I'm going to let you have the last say just because you're the only one here who's actually hardcore defending Gase. So go ahead and close us out.
I think Gase is doing exactly what he needs to be doing with the players that he has right now, and the fact that he has, he's lost so many good players that were part of that scheme package that he needed to be successful. And I think especially with Osweiler in there, he's got to focus on those short plays and running the ball, and I think that's exactly what we're going to continue to see. This Sunday when we play in Green Bay, and I have a feeling, I'm hoping that we see that run game come a little bit more alive than we've seen the last couple of weeks. And I just hope, when Osweiler's throwing the ball, I'm just thinking to myself, please don't make any mistakes. And so far, he's not done too bad, throwing 6 touchdowns and 3 interceptions on the season. So it looks like they're trying to manage the game as good as possible. And I'll tell you, if our defense can build on what they did last week against a really bad quarterback with one of the best quarterbacks in the league, we could come out of Green Bay with a win. Any given Sunday, anything's possible. And I know all of us are going to be rooting, and all the Dolphins fans out there are going to be rooting for him. So I have not given up on the season. I will refuse to give up on the season until we are mathematically eliminated. I am not rooting for us to have a low win-loss record so we can get a higher draft pick, as some other people have suggested, because a higher draft pick doesn't mean anything. in this lifetime as an NFL team. And I hope we can make it to the playoffs, because you know what? I'd rather be at the playoffs and say that we've gotten there versus having to continue to watch it from home as we do most times than not. So that's all I got, guys.
Yeah, Ian, your eternal optimism is. We appreciate it. We really do. I honestly, I think in our heart of hearts, we really hope you're right. So
thanks, guys.
So we really do. We really hope you're right.
Oh, I do too. I feel like our chances are slim and none this weekend in Green Bay. Our offense is so bad right now. Aaron Rodgers is going to get a lot of chances with the football, and that just equals points for Green Bay, and it just doesn't look good. And it's going to be a game in Green Bay that's a very difficult atmosphere to play in for our players, and I think there's a lot of uncertainty within our coaching. Like I don't know how in sync Adam Gase and Matt Burke are right now, and the players I think are picking up on that. So it's a lot to ask for that team to go into Green Bay against somebody like Aaron Rodgers, but I'm absolutely hoping they pull it off. I mean, that would be amazing. Very, very difficult win, and I hope they can do it.
Well, here's hoping. So thank you all so much for joining us through this long Adam Gase focused discussion. I hope you have enjoyed our return, and we are going to try to get back to doing more regular shows. It's been a very busy and honestly very depressing season so far, even though we are 5-4. Isn't that sad? We're winning. It's a winning record, and we're depressed. But
we can make the playoffs, Lewis.
Okay. All right. So, again, thank you all so much for joining us. For myself and Chad Ronenbaum and Ian Berger, we'd like to say good night, and we will see you next time.